You might be manipulating yourself by trying so hard, pushing so hard, doing everything at once. There are a lot of tired people out there who don't understand why. It's not lack of effort. It's not lack of faith. It's not lack of discipline. Actually, it's the opposite. The more this person tries, the emptier they feel. In this video, you're going to understand why your effort might be hurting you without you even realizing it, and what John 15 reveals about this that almost nobody has the courage to say clearly. Being manipulated by someone else hurts. But when you are the architect of your own exhaustion, everything changes. Because you can't see the trap when you're the one building it. I spent years believing that if I tried harder, produced more, pushed myself more, I would finally feel peace. But the harder I forced it, the more anxious and empty I became. And it took me a long time to understand what was really happening. There's a very big difference between abiding and forcing. The danger is that the line between the two is invisible, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now, what's underneath that line. But before I show you that, a quick invite. If you found this video because the title spoke to you somehow, you're probably going to like what I bring here every week. This channel exists to translate deep spiritual and emotional truths without empty phrases and without surface-level content. If that resonates with you, subscribe and leave a like on this video because this kind of content needs to reach people who are tired and still believe the problem is that they're not trying hard enough. There's a type of exhaustion that has no obvious explanation. It's not the tiredness of someone who didn't sleep. It's not the tiredness of someone who had a rough week at work. It's different. It's the kind of exhaustion that's already there when you wake up, before any obligations, before any pressure comes from outside. You open your eyes, and you're already heavy. And the strangest part is that when you look at your own life, you can't really explain where that weight is coming from, because you are trying. You hold yourself accountable when you fail. You try again when you fall. You pray. You seek. You haven't given up. From the outside, anyone would say you're putting in the work. And yet, something doesn't add up. Pay attention to this. There's a feeling that follows a lot of people in this place. The feeling that no matter how much you do, it's never enough, that you could have done more, that you should be further along, that your faith should be stronger, your routine more consistent, your life more aligned with what you believe. And when that feeling shows up, the automatic response is to try harder. You increase the discipline, you increase the internal pressure, you create new routines, cut out what seems to be getting in the way, try to be more consistent, more focused, more dedicated. Because the logic seems simple. If what you're doing isn't enough, the problem is that you need to do more. But more effort doesn't fix it. And that's confusing, because it shouldn't be this way. If you're trying harder, why do you feel worse? If you're holding yourself more accountable, why has the anxiety increased? If you're producing more, why hasn't the emptiness gone away? I know this place. Not from the outside, from the inside. I went through seasons of my life that, from the outside, looked like my most disciplined, most productive, most organized. And those were exactly the seasons where I felt the most anxious, the most empty, the most distant from anything that felt like real peace. And what I didn't understand back then, and what a lot of people don't understand while they're in it, is that the symptom isn't physical exhaustion. The symptom is a constant feeling of inadequacy that no amount of effort can resolve, because the effort is attacking the wrong place. This exists in the lives of a lot of people who are genuinely trying. And the hardest part isn't admitting it exists, it's realizing how deep it goes. When someone gets to this place, tired, empty, with the feeling that something's off, there's a response the world offers immediately. Try harder. The world's answer is always the same. Produce. Feeling inadequate? Work twice as hard. Feel distant from God? Add more prayer hours. Don't miss a single service. Anxiety kicking in? Build an even more demanding routine. The modern mindset, and even the religious one, is that if you're drowning, it's your fault for not swimming faster. And the hardest part about seeing through this logic is that it seems completely reasonable, because it makes sense. If something isn't working, you do more of what works. If you're falling behind, you speed up. If the fruit isn't showing up, you work harder. That's the logic of the modern world, and honestly, it's also the logic a lot of people learned inside their own Christian faith. I learned it too. And for a long time, I followed it exactly. There are Christians doing this without even realizing it. Not out of laziness, not out of lack of faith, because they were taught this is the right way. That perseverance means continuous effort. That holiness is built on willpower. That the answer to any spiritual emptiness is more action, more discipline, more dedication. And this is where a lot of people fall. I fell too. For a long time. Because the mistake isn't obvious. It doesn't look like a mistake while you're in it. It looks like commitment. It looks like spiritual maturity. It looks like you're taking your faith seriously. And when someone watches you from the outside, they'll probably say exactly that. What a dedicated person. What nobody sees is what's happening on the inside. You feel the anxiety rising every time you miss a goal, and the guilt, that silent guilt that shows up when the routine slips even one day. You try to pray. You spend hours trying to get close to God, and He feels distant. It's a tiredness that simply doesn't go away when you lie down at night because it's not in your body. And what bothers me is that this mistake often comes from well-intentioned guidance. Someone at some point said, try harder, push more, don't quit, and people did exactly that, and it didn't work. And they thought the problem was them, that they didn't have enough faith, that they weren't disciplined enough, that they needed to try even harder. That's the cycle. You try to fix with brute force something that doesn't yield to force. And the reason effort will never resolve this emptiness is one thing: pay attention. When I went deep into this, what I found is that the mechanism is different from what it looks like on the surface. Most people assume the problem is lack of effort, so the logical solution is more effort. But what's happening underneath is something completely different. Excessive effort, in most cases, isn't discipline. It's control. Let me explain what that means in practice. When a person is feeling guilt, fear, emptiness, or the constant feeling of not being enough, feelings that are uncomfortable, heavy, hard to carry, they need to do something with that. And what effort offers is an exit that looks productive. If I stay busy enough, if I keep pressuring myself enough, if I keep producing enough, maybe I won't have to feel what I'm feeling. Productivity becomes anesthesia, not consciously. Nobody wakes up thinking I'm going to use discipline to avoid feeling what I feel. It happens underneath, silently. The person only realizes they feel bad when they stop, that the emptiness shows up when they slow down, that the anxiety increases during rest, not during effort. So they conclude the problem is stopping, so they keep moving. Research on emotional burnout shows exactly this. Many people living in hyperproductivity aren't motivated by purpose. They're motivated by avoidance. They're using constant activity to avoid contact with what they feel inside. And the problem is that it works in the short term, for a few hours, a few days, a few weeks. But it doesn't fix anything. And over time, the cost increases. You get more tired, more anxious, more empty, and more convinced that the problem is that you still haven't tried hard enough. This is where things get interesting. Because when you understand how this works underneath, the mistake I showed you becomes completely obvious. More effort doesn't work because effort was never the problem. The problem is what's underneath the effort, the emotional pain it's trying to control. And Scripture already had this a long time ago. In John 15, Jesus doesn't say produce more, doesn't say try harder, doesn't say push with more discipline. He says abide. Abide in me. Because without me, you can do nothing. The branch doesn't produce fruit by force. It produces fruit when it's connected to the vine. When the connection is alive, the fruit shows up naturally. When the branch disconnects and tries to produce on its own, it withers. The Bible isn't describing a motivational metaphor. It's describing a mechanism. Effort without abiding doesn't produce fruit. It produces exhaustion. And the reason trying harder never works is exactly this. You're trying to fix with brute force something that only gets fixed through connection. It's like trying to carry water in a leaking bucket by running faster. The problem isn't the speed, it's the hole. And as long as a person doesn't understand that there's a hole, that there's a disconnection underneath all that effort, they'll keep running. Faster and faster, more and more tired, further and further from the peace they're looking for. And here's the point that changes everything. When you realize your effort has stopped being discipline and turned into an attempt to control what you feel inside. So, what actually works? If the problem is a disconnection that effort can't fix, and if more effort only deepens the cycle, the solution can't be more of the same. The solution has to attack the mechanism. And the mechanism, as I've shown you, isn't lack of force, it's lack of abiding. Let me show you something. John 15 isn't just a text about faith. It's a precise description of how spiritual and emotional transformation actually works. Jesus uses an image anyone can understand, a vine and its branches. And what he says is simple. The branch doesn't produce fruit because it tries. The branch produces fruit because it's connected, because it abides, because the life of the vine flows through it. When I finally understood this for real, not as a decorative verse, but as a mechanism, something changed. Because I realized my problem was never lack of effort. It was that I was trying to produce fruit disconnected from the source. I was running with the leaking bucket faster, like I told you before. And the solution wasn't to run even faster. It was to stop, find the hole, and reconnect with what actually produces. Abiding isn't passivity. That's the point that needs to be clear. Abiding isn't crossing your arms. It isn't settling. It isn't giving up on growth. Abiding is an active posture of connection. It's keeping the channel open between you and the source. It's the difference between working from peace and working from fear, between acting from clarity and acting from anxiety, between discipline born from purpose and effort born from guilt. And the difference between the two doesn't show up in the effort itself. It shows up in the origin of the effort. When you act from abiding, the tiredness is different. It's the tiredness of someone who did something meaningful and actually rests when they stop. When you act from compulsive effort, the tiredness never goes away. Because the engine isn't purpose, it's the constant attempt to control what you feel inside. Scripture doesn't just point to this path, it explains why it works. Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus doesn't say try harder and then come. He says come first. Rest isn't the reward for effort, it's the condition for fruit. Psalm 127:2 says it's useless to wake up early, work late into the night, and eat the bread of toil, because God grants sleep to those he loves, not as a reward for productivity, as a gift to those who are connected. And Galatians 5 shows that the fruit of the Spirit, love, peace, joy, self-control, aren't the results of human effort. They're the natural consequences of being connected to the right source. Fruit isn't manufactured. Fruit appears. When I traded the cycle of compulsive effort for the real practice of abiding, the difference wasn't immediate in terms of output. It was immediate in terms of origin. I started acting from a different place. And over time, the fruit was different too, because it was coming from the right place, not being forced from the wrong one. Is this destroying people silently? It is. The cycle of effort without abiding is draining people who are genuinely trying. And what stops this process isn't more discipline, it's reconnection. It's learning the difference between abiding and forcing, and starting to build from there. Knowing you need to abide is the easy part. The hard part is knowing how to actually do that in practice. Because abiding isn't an abstract concept you just understand, it's a posture. And there's a right way to build this into your daily life. In practice, the change doesn't start with a task list. It starts with an honest question before you act. Where is this coming from? From the desire to grow or from the fear of falling behind? The second move goes against everything you've been taught. You don't produce to connect. You stop deliberately before you produce. And the real proof that something has shifted comes when you slow down. That's when you observe whether what rises in the silence is the rest of someone who trusts or the anxiety of someone who's lost control. John 15 doesn't talk about branches that produce non-stop. It talks about branches that abide, and abiding includes the moments when nothing visible is happening. The vine keeps working in the branch even when the branch looks still. The growth process happens on the inside before it shows up on the outside. Have you ever noticed how moments of silence and slowing down are exactly the ones that generate the most resistance in someone living in compulsive effort? It's not a coincidence. It's the mechanism defending itself. Because in those moments, without the movement to cover it, what was underneath starts to surface. And that's where abiding truly begins, not in the absence of action, but in the honest presence of connection. These aren't a task list. They're a shift in posture, and posture changes slowly, not all at once. And I need to tell you the truth about what you're going to find in the middle of this. Applying this change, your life isn't going to become magical overnight. I already made the mistake of thinking that just understanding the theory would speed up the healing. It didn't. What changes fastest isn't what you'd expect. The first thing that changes isn't your behavior, it's your awareness of it. In the first few days applying this, you're going to keep acting from compulsive effort. You're going to keep feeling the anxiety when you stop, the guilt when you fail, the internal pressure as always. The difference is that now you'll notice while it's happening. You'll recognize this move is coming from fear, not from connection. That seems like a small thing. It's not. Awareness before action is the first real sign that the process is working. The second phase, which takes weeks, not days, is starting to create small pauses between the impulse and the action, not eliminating the impulse, just creating space between feeling and automatically responding. That space is where abiding starts to actually take hold. And what takes the longest is exactly what feels most urgent at the start, the feeling of consistent peace, the absence of emptiness, the tiredness that finally goes away for real. Those results come, but they come later, after the old pattern has been interrupted enough for the new one to take root. There was a point in my process where I thought it wasn't working. The external behavior hadn't changed much. Life seemed the same. And that was exactly when the change was happening most deeply, just on the inside, where you couldn't see it yet. Sign that it's working even when it doesn't seem like it. You start to notice the difference between days when you acted from connection and days when you acted from pressure. Not because the days changed, because you now have a reference point for comparison, and that reference gets clearer and clearer over time. Sign that the old pattern is dissolving. Rest starts to feel less guilty, not immediately, gradually. Moments of stillness start generating less anxiety than before. This doesn't happen in a week. It happens over months of consistent practice. There's no shortcut here. And any guidance that promised quick results was setting you up to quit when the real process started. Because the real process is exactly this: good days, hard days, internal resistance, falling back into the old pattern and returning to the practice. It's not linear, but it's real. And the difference between those who make it through this process and those who quit in the middle isn't willpower. It's honest expectations. Those who know what to expect and when to expect it. Stay when it gets hard. Those who expected fast transformation quit right at the point where the deep change was just beginning. With the right expectations, you're more prepared. But there's still one more layer, the predictable stumbles that show up specifically when people try to apply this, and knowing them in advance makes all the difference. Before we wrap up, I need to show you the mistakes that come up most often when someone tries to apply this. And they're not mistakes of laziness. They're mistakes made by people who are genuinely trying. That's exactly why they're sometimes the hardest to catch while they're happening. The first mistake is turning abiding into another goal. The person hears about connecting before producing, about observing where their actions come from, and turns it into a checklist, starts pressuring themselves to abide right, feels guilt when they fail, spends the day monitoring whether they abided enough. This happens because the old pattern is still active. The effort wasn't replaced, it was just redirected. Now the person is using pressure to try to control the abiding, and this fails for the same reason nothing else worked before. The fix is simple. When you catch yourself measuring abiding like productivity, stop. Instead of checking whether you abided enough today, look inward in the moment of action. What's driving you right now? If it's guilt or fear of falling behind, just recognize it and step back, without punishing yourself for it. The second mistake is interpreting the initial discomfort as a sign that it isn't working. In the first few days, the person doesn't feel more peace. They feel more awareness. They start to see clearly where their impulses come from, how much the movement was covering something emotionally. And that's uncomfortable. So they conclude the practice made everything worse. But it didn't. The truth is that your constant movement was functioning as anesthesia. When you stop, the effect wears off. What was hidden underneath the routine simply rises to the surface. It's not that you got worse. It's that you're finally feeling what was always there. The sign that it's working isn't the absence of discomfort. It's a different kind of discomfort. Before, it was a vague weight with no name. Now, you start to identify. I'm acting out of fear. I'm reacting out of guilt. I'm trying to control so I don't have to feel. That's progress, even if it still hurts. The third mistake is confusing understanding with changing. The person listens, grasps it, feels like something made sense, and stops there. Saves the video, shares it, recommends it, but doesn't take anything into practice. Weeks later, still in the same cycle and can't figure out why. This happens because understanding what the problem is gives you a pleasant relief in the moment, and in the short term, that feels like enough. Your mind tricks you into thinking you already solved the issue just by understanding the mechanism, without needing to change a single thing in practice. But the pattern only changes through repetition, not through understanding. So before you close this video, define one concrete action for the next 24 hours, not a 30-day plan, something small and specific. For example, tomorrow, before you open your phone, stop for 2 minutes and ask where the first impulse of the day is coming from. Just that. That's how change begins. You know what works, what to expect, and what to avoid. What's left now is to start, simply, concretely, today. After everything shown here, the plan is simpler than it seems. Not because the problem was simple, but because now you're working with the right mechanism. 3 moves, starting today. In practice, you start like this. Tomorrow, before picking up your phone, your agenda, or trying to produce anything, take 2 minutes. Just that. And ask yourself one honest question. Am I acting from pressure or from peace? Then, throughout the day, in the first pause you get, notice what happens in the silence. Does anxiety hit because you're not doing anything, or can you actually rest? Just observe, without judging yourself. And when the old pattern tries to come back, and it will, don't spiral and don't beat yourself up. Just notice what happened. The simple act of stopping and recognizing whether you're in blind effort or in abiding already breaks the cycle for that day. 2 minutes in the morning. 1 observation per day. 1 question when the pattern returns. That's not the complete plan. It's the honest beginning of one. The fruit doesn't come from effort. It comes from abiding. And if you made it this far, you probably recognized something in yourself along the way, not from the outside, from the inside. And recognizing is the first step. But recognizing alone doesn't close the cycle. Now tell me in the comments, in what area of your routine do you know you're running on autopilot, using brute force to avoid dealing with the silence? Write it here. I read the comments because saying it out loud is the only real way to start changing. And if you know someone who looks strong all the time but is emotionally drained inside, send this video to that person. Sometimes one insight at the right moment changes everything. Subscribe if you haven't yet. See you in the next one.